morning, everyone. Thanks for being here today with us. So this is the first climate talk today. So today will be about preparation for COP28 multi-stakeholder dialogue. So this is organized by the German Embassy in Jakarta. And my name is Yuliana Cahyawulan. I'm an advisor at GIZ Indonesia. And also currently I'm a project manager for the Land and Seascape Solution for Indonesia. So this is one of the international climate initiative bilateral projects funded by the German government. Yeah. So today we are going to have an exciting dialogue. Yeah. So we have three distinguished speakers. Hopefully Ibu Yulia will going to join us soon. Yeah. But nevertheless we already have two distinguished speakers, and also we have so many experts here coming from different organizations. So today we are going to discuss issues that are very important for us and our future generation. So all participants today here, there are also some online participants, I hope, yeah, and all participants will have a rare opportunity providing their views and inputs to the German government as well as to the Indonesian government on climate change issues, just energy transitions, financing, mitigation and adaptation, and also the topic on climate and biodiversity linkages. Yeah? So hopefully your valuable input later will be also contribute to the discussion in the COP28 that to be held in Dubai at the end of this year. Yeah? So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to the Charge d'Affaires of the German Embassy, Mr. Thomas Graf. Please give your big applause. And we already have also the Deputy Minister for Maritime and Natural Resources, Bappenas, Dr. Vivi Yulaswati, Ibu Vivi. Yeah, and we have hopefully later on coming Ibu Yulia as well from Ministry of Environment and Forestry. So welcome Mr. Graf and Ibu Vivi. Yeah, we are happy to have you here. So without further ado, yeah, first I would like to give a floor to Mr. Thomas Graf. Yeah, so we want to know. Yeah, we are aware that for the German government, climate change is a high on priority list, yeah? So can you maybe tell us a bit about how Germany respond to the urging of drastic emission reduction in the country, as well as German engagement on the climate action abroad, yeah? Particularly maybe in connection to Indonesian-German cooperations, yeah? Please, Pak Thomas Graf.
Yeah, thank you very much, and a warm welcome to Ibu Vivi, Deputy Minister at Bappenas, and those here around the table, and those joining us online to this first iteration of climate talks organized by the German Embassy here in Jakarta. Before we start our discussion, I would like to give you a brief outline as requested about our priorities in terms of climate. As already mentioned, 2023 marks a very special year. It is the year of the first global stocktake. It will show where we stand as a global community on the road to reaching our climate goals and where we need to double our efforts. It is not hard to predict that the global stocktake will reveal a large gap, as the latest IPCC report already does. For one thing, a large gap between our concrete targets in NDCs and long-term strategies and the global goal of staying within 1.5 degrees Celsius. And for another thing, even between our concrete targets and how we are implementing them. These gaps we need to close, and we need to do that urgently. This is why the German government has decided to raise climate protection up high on our agenda and carry out, among many other things, these so-called climate talks in our embassies all over the world as a place for exchange, for effective empowerment. For our first Jakarta climate talk today, I would like to take us a look at the run-up to the COP28 conference in Dubai later this year. COP28 is the final crossroads towards 1.5 degrees, and that is crucial because 1.5 degrees is not a political target, but the planet's pain threshold. And we must act now, before 2030, to keep 1.5 degrees within reach. 1.5 degrees is central to ensuring a livable future for all. Otherwise, we risk tilting central systems and triggering cascades in the Earth system that will further accelerate climate change and lead to the loss of entire ecosystems, like, for instance, the Amazon rainforest. What we miss now, we cannot make up for. As the IPCC has stated, our actions today will determine what life can be like on our planet for thousands of years to come. And let me stress that every 1/10 of a degree counts, because every 1/10 of a degree costs livelihoods, causes hunger, suffering, and resource conflicts. Business as usual means an average global warming of 3.2 degrees by the year 2100. This figure masks a world of climate catastrophes, a volatile security situation, and increasingly scarce resources in which human security is no longer guaranteed. Therefore, we must take immediate action and do even more to drastically reduce emissions immediately. The limits of adaptation will soon be reached. The consequences are already threatening the lives of millions of people. Stabilizing global warming at 1.5 degrees gives us a chance of keeping climate impacts, at least at a scale we will still be able to handle. We know what needs to be done. We know all the policy approaches and technologies to halve emissions in all sectors by 2030. We know how to make adaptation effective. We know how to reform the financial sector so that public and private funds fight the climate crisis together. We need to focus our efforts on advocating for more climate ambition globally and overcoming obstacles, such as lacking implementation, financing, and misalignment of policies. So what are we doing as Germany? For one thing, we are accelerating the global energy transition and building partnerships for socially just ecological transformations towards climate neutrality. In our international cooperation, we strengthen the development of a green energy supply based on renewables and greater energy efficiency. We are shaping transformation away from fossil dependency towards more sustainable models of prosperity and development in a socially just and inclusive way, because this is the only way that will be successful. That is why we are committed to ensuring that developing and emerging countries have access to the financial resources and technical expertise they need to implement their own energy transition and decarbonize their economies. In concrete terms, we are implementing the global energy transition with our partners, for example, through our Just Energy Transition partnerships. An important example is the Just Energy Transition partnership between Germany as one of several donors and Indonesia, which was sealed in Bali last year in the margins of the G20 summit. We are strengthening our cooperation with rainforest countries such as Indonesia in order to halt deforestation by 2030 and achieve global biodiversity and nature conservation targets. To this end, Germany is investing 2 billion euros in rainforest protection by 2025. We are building the Climate Club, which Indonesia has joined, which will enable us to go about industrial decarbonization in a coordinated and fair way. Many companies have focused their strategies on 1.5 degrees. They need a level playing field to make this ambition worthwhile. We protect and strengthen natural carbon sinks, such as forests and peatlands. I hope we can soon welcome Indonesia to the initiative Enhancing Nature-Based Solutions for an Accelerated Climate Transformation, or ENACT in short, following the recent invitation by the German Federal Minister for the Environment to this initiative, which was founded at last year's COP by Germany, Egypt, and IUCN. In sectors where alternatives to fossil fuels do not yet exist, for instance, cement and chemicals, we will also target technological approaches to carbon capture and storage. COP28 in November and December this year is where we must finally decide to phase out fossil fuels as quickly as possible. This means, of course, that we need a huge expansion of renewables. And that is why we are committed to ambitious targets and their implementation. This includes a global target on renewable energies. Germany will increase its own ambitions in all sectors and consistently implement the Climate Protection Act, with at least 65% emissions reduction by 2030, at least 88% by 2040, and climate neutrality by 2045. We are delivering on our promise of public climate finance, and with 2 billion euros have announced the largest contribution to the second replenishment of the Green Climate Fund so far. In addition, we are mobilizing more private and public funds internationally. We want to turn development banks and other financial institutions into catalysts for climate protection. We will make available 6 billion euros per year from budget funds for international climate financing by 2025. The climate crisis is also a justice issue. We must strengthen the resilience of the weakest, in particular by expanding social security systems and highlighting the opportunities offered by the global energy transition for greater prosperity and participation. As part of our international climate initiative, we support projects that help island states, for example, to take precautions and deal with climate-related loss and damage. Indonesia is the country we invest in the very most through this initiative, namely some 520 million euros. Ladies and gentlemen, we have got no time at all to lose. Therefore, let us make the best use we can of these 2 hours of climate talk today. We would be interested to hear what you think, what should be emphasized stronger at COP28. Where do you think Germany, Indonesia, or the international community as a whole still have blind spots? What questions do you have and what ideas? So I'm eager to hear them and hope that we can use this exchange today to identify entry points for closer, better, and more effective cooperation for the sake of our planet. I've spoken much too long. I'm finished now. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to our discussion later.
Thank you, Mr. Graf. Please give your big applause to Mr. Graf. And now, Mr. Graf already mentioned, how German efforts and commitment, not only at home in Germany, but also globally, with the global just energy transition partnership, and also on rainforest, so this is like 2 most important sectors, so now I want to move to the Indonesian side, we have Ibu Vivi today. So Ibu Vivi, 2 days ago, Bappenas Minister, Pak Mono Arfa already stated that Indonesia will potentially experience economic losses up to 544 trillion rupiah due to the impact of climate change. So therefore, maybe you can give us some overview about Indonesia's strategy to address climate change impacts, and what is the positions of climate agenda in the National Long-Term Development Plan. So I think 2045 is really important for Indonesia. So Indonesia have a goals for achieving Golden Indonesia 2045. So this is also will be linked with the climate agenda, the long-term climate agenda. So Ibu Vivi, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Graf, ladies and gentlemen who join here as well as online. I'd like to use this opportunity to share some slides and respond about the challenges as well as the policy directions that we are preparing to tackle the climate change. Next slide, please. So this is only a context why we preparing a transformations, particularly to relate with this talk in this afternoon. I'd like to focus more on the economic transformations. So if you see this is actually a graph since early period, 1969 to the future, 2045, in which show that Indonesia has been actually in the middle income trap for about 30 years. And we don't want to be here in these situations in the future. So that's why we are preparing a long-term development plan, which is kind of like a framework to move Indonesian out of the middle income trap situations and become an advanced country by 2045. By having these visions means that Indonesia have to grow at least 6%. Currently, our growth is 5.17%. So we have to grow 6% at least or 7% if we want to achieve the advanced country earlier than 2045. However, we cannot using the business as usual. Next slide, please. Our current development is still highly dependent on the fossil energy. So the blood of the development rather maybe black or brown, yeah. So we have to grow as high as possible, but cleaner. This is only some facts that the greenhouse gas emissions keep continue increase. We can see here the red graph in the left hand side. This is about 2020, a bit decline because during the pandemic we are quite okay, but still our renewable energy share keep stagnant. And the emissions, we can see at the bottom graph, keep increasing. And actually from the data we could see here that the transportation is the biggest contributor for the pollutions, about the 44%, followed by the energy industry, as well as housing, commercials, and the manufacturers. So just give an example from the vehicles. We can see here that actually the burden of the transportations because of our mobility is using the fossil fuel. So you can see the right-hand side, from the number of the vehicles, mostly coming from the motorcycles, not only in Jabodetabek, Jakarta, Bogor, Jakarta and the surrounding areas, but also in Indonesia, our motorcycle heavily contain or rely on the fossil. But converting into the electricity is not easy. We already subsidize some of the fuels, some of the motorcycles like the Gojek or Grab using the electric motorcycle, but then there are some complaints from the drivers that the speed of the motorcycle is not as fast as the one who use the fuel. So means that's not only about reducing the subsidy, but also the technology are part of the challenges. And we are talking also about the green investment as well as preparing the transitions of the green job. So not only about blaming on the fossil, but again, how to really put into or build the ecosystem toward greener or green economy That's our challenge. The right hand side at the bottom is about the fiscal burden coming from the energy subsidy. So again, the agenda for transformations toward the green economy need to be more complete. Ecosystem. Next slide, please. This is actually coming from the previous seminars, which shows about the triple planetary crisis that increasingly urge Indonesia to carry out an economic transformations toward a green economy. First, the climate change, we could see some numbers, not only in terms of the disasters, economic loss, but also the number of deaths, which also increasing, and also the pollutions. So, particularly for Indonesia context, which we are islands, the increasing temperatures also bring some risk to the water, the way we grow the agriculture, and somehow bring some risk also for the health issues. And of course, the pollutions is a hot topic for Jakarta. And actually, we are not talking only about the air pollutions, but also from the waste, which we should think how to tackle the problem of the food loss and waste from the way we produce the food, the way we consume, and of course the way we manage our waste. And one problem that are increasing also from the loss of the biodiversity. So of these challenges is kind of like a main reason why we have to prepare the next long-term development plan 2025-2045 need to be greener. Next slide, please. So the green economy is one of the game changer for Indonesia economic transformations. Of course, we have to improve our human resources and competitiveness, and then increase the productivity. We are talking about the industrializations, economic integrations, namely the logistics, the connectivities, moving the capital city as also one of the game changers to improve a new source of growth in the eastern part, and also the digital transformations. But the how to, everything need to be greener. On the right hand side, it's about the projections of the economy. In fact, by managing the carrying capacity of Indonesia, we can grow on the average at least by 6.2 up until 2045. We can manage our growth high and greener. So this is that's why we put the target of economic growth between 6 to 7, meaning we can grow but cannot be business as usual. So how to do that? Next slide, please. We already started with the low carbon and climate resilience development as a backbone of Indonesia economic transformation. We already started in the current RPJMN, the midterm development plan, by putting two agenda, the low carbon development through waste management and circular economy, green industry development, sustainable energy development, blue carbon in coastal marine, and sustainable land use, as well as climate resilience development. But again, it's not enough because this is only a plan. So the challenges, like I mentioned, including the green investment, green technology, as well as preparing the green job transitions, is particularly our challenges now. Next slide, please. So by having all the agenda in place already, we have more conditionality. That's why Pak Graf mentioned about the JETP. Again, we put some targets actually very ambitious target, but how to do it? We are now preparing the CIPP, Pak, finalizing the CIPP and getting an ownership from governments. That's another key issues. How to ensuring the commitment, the ownership, as well as a consistency in the implementation is really the key. So just energy transitions need to be accompanied with the clean transformation, sustainable agriculture, forest, and land use. Sustainable for water conservation, circular economy, blue economy is part of the agenda that in the next long term and mid-term need to be more integrated. One more thing is about measuring the progress, because like I mentioned, it's just not on the plan. We have to ensure that the implementation are in place. So next slide, please. We are also preparing the Green Economy Index to monitor the progress of all of this. Maybe I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ibu Vivi. Give applause to Ibu Vivi. Yeah. So there's lots have been done by the Indonesian government, also the German governments, yeah. But as Mr. Graf mentioned before, there's still gaps need to be closed, yeah. So not only on the implementation, but also means of implementation, particularly both speaking about financing and private engagement, yeah. So now is actually this is now coming to us, yeah. So this is your opportunity to provide inputs and share your views to Mr. Graf and Ibu Vivi, yeah. So your views can also be later considered for the next COP negotiations, yeah. So I think for this session, I would like to have you raise your hands, yeah, and then please say your name and also your organization, and then someone will come with speakers, and you can give this rare opportunity to provide your input. Anyone, hopefully, unfortunately for the online, maybe they can give through the chat features, yeah, and then later we will pick some question from the online participant. Anyone from the offline to give your views, maybe how Indonesia or Germany do better, or how to encourage private sector engagement, or anything, yeah? You can also mention some ideas. Anyone from the international organizations, maybe from ZIZ? You want, Pak? Okay. Please state your name.
Thank you. My name is Gerd Fleischer from GIZ. I'm the lead climate advisor here based in Jakarta. And I would like to know from your views, both of you, Mr. Graf and Ibu Vivi, on the regulatory barriers towards renewable energy, because we all know that in order to get away from fossil fuel use, we need to ramp up renewables, and there we have a number of options like wind energy, we have solar power, PV installation, also geothermics. So we know both from Germany, from my home country, that there are a lot of regulatory hurdles if we want to install wind power generation, for instance. In Indonesia as well, I recently read that the restrictions for local content in terms of solar rooftop PV installation, that there's discussion to relax those. What is your view on the importance of these regulatory hurdles? Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Graf? Ibu Vivi first? You?
Yeah. Thank you very much for the questions. Yeah, in terms of regulatory, for the new and renewable energy, we are already finalizing now in the process of discussions with the parliament. So hopefully the law for new and renewable energy will come out soon. Meanwhile, we are also preparing many other regulations in relate to the carbon values and some implementations regulations. I think the Ministry of Environment come, they will they could give the update. So the situations is about progressing all of these regulations, in which actually we want to set up more complete ecosystem for the renewable energy. So for me, it's just a matter of time, Pak. I think all of us already prepare and know exactly about the challenges, and particularly for the implementation. Once it comes out, I think we have to prepare that it could really be a foundations of proper implementations.
I can only add that obviously the regulatory framework plays a key role in increasing the share of renewable energies. On the other hand, every country has its individual challenges when it comes to establishing the right regulatory framework. You have to take into account also the vested interests of many groups. You know, in Germany we have the discussion about maximum or minimum distances between windmills. Right now we have a discussion about whether or not and under what circumstances solar panels may be installed on individual balconies of houses, things like that. I mean, this may sound like nitty-gritty, but this is important because you have to take a whole variety of interests into account, because without a consensus in society about the buildup of renewables, it will be difficult to make progress on this. So each country has its individual challenges, and each country has to find the right compromise. And I think, but we all are united by the will that we see the need to, by the will to increase the share of renewables. We all see the need to do that, but the way how to achieve this goal will differ from country to country, obviously.
Thank you, Mr. Graf. So, and also Ibu Vivi, yeah, so that's the views, yeah, so each country has different challenges, yeah, but I think already some efforts already conducted. So we just received information that unfortunately Ibu Yulia from Ministry of Environment and Forestry cannot join us today, yeah, but yeah, I think, so Mr. Gerd Fleischer already mentions, asked questions about the energy sectors, yeah? So maybe anyone also wants to add on the other sectors, yeah? I don't know, maybe from EVO, related to forest, peatland, and also of course pollutions, yeah? Currently like a big trend in Indonesia, particularly in Jakarta. So anyone wants to? Yes, please state your name and organization. Yes, thank you.
Selamat pagi, good morning. My name is Adam Durand from the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, known as FAO. Firstly, I'd like to, I've introduced myself by saying I'm the Chief Technical Advisor in several projects in Indonesia on forest monitoring and REDD-based initiatives in Indonesia. Firstly, I'd like to thank both presenters here today, and I hope at some point we will also get to hear the third presenter in one of your other series. This is a good start. I'm pleased for Germany to be taking this initiative because it is very important, this task, as the Chargé d'Affaires pointed out. I was pleased to hear and learn about the ambitions for this ENACT initiative. I do recall hearing something at COP, but I haven't heard much since. So I'm wondering if, which includes rainforest protection, sustainable management, very ambitious targets. I've looked up online what is that, but I would like to know, so I have a question for both our Indonesian speaker from Bapanas as well as the Germany. If you could tell us for Germany, what plans are you thinking of for Indonesia? What discussions have you had? And perhaps from the Indonesian side, what Indonesia might look for and hopefully have some discussions for in relation to this ENACT initiative, which is about rainforest protection, sustainable management, livelihoods as far as I understand. So both sides on this ENACT initiative that we heard about today. Can I get some responses, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Adam. So maybe we can start with Mr. Graf now. So this is about ENACT, Pak. You mentioned before, yeah? So what's your plan with the ENACT and particularly in cooperation for Indonesia?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for the question. First of all, obviously, we hope that Indonesia will soon join ENACT. This is the first point, obviously. On the other hand, and the other thing is, we all know that Indonesia has ambitious goals in this regard, that forests and peatlands are so important in their capacity as natural carbon sinks. We know that Indonesia, and it's a pity that Ibu Yulia is not here today because she could have told us in much greater detail about Indonesia's ambitions in this regard. We very much welcome that Indonesia wants to make, in particular, the forest sector, does not only want to make it carbon neutral, but wants to turn it into a real carbon sink. And even more important are, or as important are the mangroves mentioned by Ibu Fifi. They have long been underestimated in their role as carbon sinks, but Indonesia, and I'm really delighted to see that, Indonesia has understood the important role played by mangroves and is doing a tremendous lot on to restore mangroves. This is something where Indonesia is doing a tremendous service to the whole world. Of course, we, Germany, industrialized countries, we have our homework in this regard as well. We all know that in particular when it comes to peatlands, we have committed sins in the past. And we know that that is something we need to work on, where we need to increase our efforts. And this is what the ENACT initiatives, we hope, will help to do, not only developing countries, as we say, but all the countries that are affected and that have the possibility to do something. Because these natural carbon sinks, quite honestly, they are an easy way to do something, to mitigate climate change, to do something good for the climate. And they are part of the low-hanging fruit, because the more complex issues are also before us. But I think the important thing is to start with the low-hanging fruit. Because, you know, climate change, climate mitigation, if you look at the discussion that we have in Germany, I mean, this is by a huge part of the society, you get the impression this climate mitigation is perceived as a threat to personal welfare. Our task is, I believe, to demonstrate that this is not the case. And measures like building natural carbon sinks, I believe, could also help to increase acceptance of climate mitigation measures on a larger scale. So that much from me.
Yeah, just. I, I think I won't answer that. Maybe KLHK have more say on it, but I just want to add points about in terms of the policy in the future. Yeah. So in terms of the new source of growth that I mentioned earlier, we are also take into consideration the blue economy as a part of the green economy that I mentioned earlier. So part of it, of course, we are talking about the blue carbon coming from the mangrove. So I think we are now aware that conserve is better than rehab or replanting the mangrove, because the values won't come up with the same values. So that's why now we are talking also about in the blue part of the blue economy. We are also talking about or preparing the transforming the the more sustainable aquaculture, which is part of it relate with the degradation in mangrove last period. And also I think I mentioned earlier when in relate to the regulations about the values of the carbon, which is including also the blue carbon. So improving the blue carbon value, so would be part of the blue economy. And we are also preparing it's about the more on the data for the mangrove. So stock take on the mangrove map, not only about where they are, but also the conditions, the quality of the mangrove itself. So we now have a better data about the map. And of course, part of the sustainable aquaculture educations, not only to the local government but also the businesses, is also part of the key to reduce the deforestations of mangrove in the future.
Thank you, Ibu Vivi and Mr. Graf. So yeah, so Ibu Vivi mentioned conserve is also important, not only restored, and I think this is really a link, yeah, with the global biodiversity framework, Montreal Kunming, yeah. So this is your last chance, yeah. We would like to have one other views from the expert here, yeah. So maybe this can be also inputs, yeah, for Ibu Vivi and Mr. Graf about linking climate and biodiversity, and maybe how to finance that as well, yeah. So anyone from CI? Okay. Please. Thank you, yes. Please state your name first, Pak.
Yes, hello everyone. Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Adi Pradana. I am the Senior Policy Director at Konservasi Indonesia. We are a national conservation foundation as the main partner of Conservation International. So first of all, we thank you for inviting us, and I hope there's still going to be opportunity for others to provide inputs. Just want to also congratulate Indonesia for, as it has been mentioned, that there has been a lot of success in reducing deforestation and leadership as well in the blue economy front. And we support the government commitments in its agenda, particularly in net follow sink, in achieving the forestry and land use sector as a net sink by 2030, as well as achieving MPA or marine protection 30% by 2045. And maybe one added value that I can bring to the discussion is we do agree that every fraction of a degree will impact Indonesia particularly, and I think we think that providing some sustainable management, protection, and restoration in specific places can be more valuable than the others. And we have a study that shows where are those places could be, and we call it the irrecoverable carbon. And we see this as places where it contains high concentration of carbon sink and also biodiversity, as you mentioned. So Indonesia has, if I may point out some data, 8.5 billion metric tons of irrecoverable carbon. And this put Indonesia as the top 5 countries in the world. And unfortunately, since 2010, Indonesia has lost about 5% of its irrecoverable carbon. And 80% of Indonesia is, can be considered high biodiversity as well. And 52% of the land area contains both high carbon and high biodiversity area. So it put really Indonesia in the forefront in achieving the global climate as well as biodiversity agenda. And we do hope through Bappenas and KLHK leadership, it can put these places in the ensuring the protection, restoration, and sustainable management. And we are happy if we can be, like maybe after this, can share those maps and data to everyone here, and maybe can be used to protect the important ecosystem like peatland, mangroves, forests, and all. And maybe after this also, we can share some of the, because it's part of the pre-COP negotiations, there are some specific recommendations that we can bring, but maybe later on. We just want to say that. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So I think we will be happy to receive your report and data. Yeah. Maybe later we will contact you after this. Yeah, to collect the data. Yeah, and we can also share with the speaker and all the participants here. So I think that's on the session. I don't know. Except if one of you really wants to have like a burning statement, yeah, that what Germany and Indonesia should bring to COP28, yeah. So, but this should be like a very short one, yeah. So what Indonesia and Germany should bring, what topics should be pushed, yeah, for the next COP. Anyone of you wants to give statement? Yes, please.
Thank you very much, but I'm not really sure whether it's going to be a short one. If it is the one that you are intending, then maybe it's a bit longer. I'm Sonny Mumbunan. I'm a coordinator of climate and sustainable finance at the University of Indonesia, and a director of the newly established master program for climate change policy at also the new university, the Indonesian International Islamic University. In Depok. Yeah, I graduated from the Helmholtz-Zentrum für Umweltforschung, so I got some exposure to the German policy and preferences. So I have 3 observations and 3 proposals when it comes to COP. The 3 observations, and Ibu Vivi already mentioned very well, that the broader context is Indonesia aspiration for upper middle income countries. We can sense this from the G20 and in some other areas. So the aspiration is very strong. This may probably define somewhat, a bit Indonesia's position when it comes to negotiations. So what I sense in Indonesia, we have a little bit of tension between asking for resources, and at the same time, because of the new status, it wants to give resources. So we need to discuss more on the role sharing things when it comes to climate negotiation, climate talks. And this should be a new narrative, not really Indonesia begging for money, but it will probably be different now, and it will touch also the discussion on JETP, for example, how role sharings are important. Another observation is why we need to integrate, and it's very relevant to Bappenas here, planning and finance. This is our battle for like decades. We really need to integrate planning and finance. The good news is Bappenas has been shown here as making progress on the planning documents, and we also want to see from the finance side to get together. Now, 3 related to COP. One is the domestic resource mobilization, good news. Starting this year, Indonesia put forest cover 15% into the allocation of general purpose transfer, DAU. That's one of the most radical, transformative in the world at the moment. So Indonesia has the capacity to mobilize its own, stable, regular, predictable in the future through DAU. The second one, on the private roles, we know the Paris Agreement, Article 2.1c, making finance flow consistent with climate projection, climate pathways. The German ministry is working now, to my knowledge, on looking at private sectors. Now, what I would like to share here is Indonesia also at the moment already started, say, currency-denominated green bonds. The big banks, commercial banks, national banks have started, and now it is going into the subnational level. So the bank, the Bank Pembangunan Daerah, as we call it, they, just for a simple story here, that the LRT here, 17 station and depot, were built using the funding from, among others, from the subnational bank in North Sumatra and Papua. So we are thinking of Papua as, poor, no resources, but they are building the LRT stations here. The point is there are possibilities for resources, but we need to share roles. And this is something that I personally think or believe we need to see in the negotiations. I think I've said, sorry for the more than 1 minute.
Thank you, Pak Soni. So yeah, I don't know whether Ibu Vivi wants to respond to that. Yeah, but basically the recommendation is also like more share and responsibility, particularly for the member of G20 countries such as Indonesia, maybe as well in the global negotiations. Yeah, but of course for developed country also to keep maintaining predictable climate finance. So maybe that's the two mentioned here. Is there anything Ibu Vivi or Mr. Graf wants to respond before I go to next session?
Yeah, thank you, Pak Soni. I think it's very well taken. In relate to the finance, we have developed the INFF, the Integrated National Financing Framework. Is actually mapping the gap on the finance toward 2030 agenda. So we know that we have the gap is around $1 trillion US dollar up until 2030. This is the gap in which we are now revising the roadmap for the SDGs in order to see how to elaborate further on the priority sectors, priority targets and goals. So we are working with many others partners like the OJK, the Financial Authority, to set up the green taxonomy, for example. So many other instruments to lead the private entities to be more sustainable investing in the related sectors. Also working with the Minister of Finance for developing the innovative financing instruments. So green bond is one of. We already also issued the SDGs bond. It's been 3 years now. And this year we also issuing the blue bond. So all these innovative instruments is actually trying to focusing on the impact of the current programs. But still, it's not enough. The remaining and also the how to measure the impact is part of the challenges. For example, in the green bond, when we are tagging the programs that quite blue, actually it just goes to the ones that very small, under 100 billion. Well, when we want to get a higher impact in the bigger one, most goes to the infrastructure which is not green or blue. So it's part of the challenge. So I think I mentioned earlier about more integrated policies or coherent ecosystem that still we need to build. So of course, 1, 2 instruments, fine, but then again, ecosystem to support the green or the blue economy is part of the things that we should develop in the future. Thanks.
Yeah, I can only add that quite obviously we do what we can to support Indonesia and other countries on their way to greening the finance system, and climate finance, as I've tried to explain in my introductory remarks, is one of the key priorities of the German government's climate agenda, political agenda, and we are committing really substantive funds to that purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, I hope that all the input has been taken by both governments. So now I want to move to the next sessions. Yeah. So we already have some views, Mr. Graf and Ibu Vivi from the expert here. Yeah. But I think there's also some questions or maybe input as well from the public, yeah? So I think Ibu Michael Lorenz, so Head of Climate and Environment at the German Embassy, already collecting some questions from the social media coming to the German Embassy. So maybe you can help reading aloud about the questions, and maybe the speakers here or the expert can also help in answering the question. Please,
Yes,
Ibu
thank you.
Michael.
So we were happy to find that quite a lot of questions came in through Instagram, so people are interested. And one of the questions that was asked was the UN Secretary General's press release stated that this is the beginning of the global boiling era, with North America, Europe, and Asia being the three continents that are visibly experiencing the current situation. What further cooperation will be done or discussed in the future, especially in the partnership between the two countries of Indonesia and Germany, to overcome the climate crisis?
Anyone wants to answer the questions? This is about further cooperations done and discussed for Indonesia and Germany to overcome the crisis of climate crisis. Anyone wants to add, Mr. Graf or Ibu Vivi?
Obviously, you can always do more, but on the other hand, I think it would be wrong to say that we are doing nothing or not enough in this regard right now. I mean, if you look at our cooperation programs, the red thread running through everything we do, Germany and Indonesia together, the red thread running through everything is climate. Already now. I think we've heard the call, and we are focusing our efforts already now on areas we need to work on. And it will be difficult to find any German cooperation project here in Indonesia that is not climate related. You know, we have projects in the transport sector, obviously focusing on green transport. We have many projects in the energy sector, obviously focusing on green energy, on transformation of the energy sector, on decarbonization. So I think we've heard the call, but again, obviously, and the question should be reason for us to think where we can do more. But again, we are already doing quite a lot, but this does not mean that we cannot do more. And we are constantly thinking about that in our bilateral discussions on our cooperation projects. I don't know, whether you would like to.
Yeah, agree totally, Pak, with Pak Graf. I just want to add that the angel is in detail on any cooperation. So I think it's about the time now to elaborate further what are in the JETP, for example. I mean, we all leaders already put quite ambitious target, not talking about 2060, rather 2050, but then how to do it, that's about the angel it's really depend on us. I mean, we still need to grow as high as possible, like I mentioned, but have to be greener. So about the housing, I think, yeah, any input from all of you, I think I would welcome on it.
Thank you for both speakers. Go to the next questions, Ibu Maike.
So the next question is a quite concrete one, again focusing on energy. What is the real evidence that Germany's efforts in energy transition towards renewable energy sources have significantly reduced emissions?
So I think this is the questions to the German team. Do you want to start, Pak Graf?
Actually, the evidence lies in the numbers, and we can say that in 2022, Germany reduced its emissions by more than 40% in comparison to the year 1990. So we have almost halved our CO2 emissions. Year on year, from 21 until 22, we managed to reduce our emissions by 2%. So even also here, we've already achieved quite something, but our ambitions are higher. Our Climate Protection Act, which is the German legislation for climate protection, in our Climate Protection Act, we committed to achieve CO2 neutrality by 2045. By the year 2030, we are under the obligation to have reduced our CO2 emissions by 65% in comparison to 1990, which is the reference year, and until the year 2040 by 88%. So, and if we stick to these goals, climate neutrality by 2045 seems to be well achievable. Of course, we constantly are adjusting our plans. We are reviewing our plans. We are constantly having a look at whether the policies implemented are actually, whether they are on target, whether they are actually suited to achieve the goals. But as of now, and in light of the actual results achieved so far, we are very confident that the goals formulated in our Climate Protection Act are within reach and can be achieved.
Thank you, Mr. Graf. So that's the evidence is shown in the numbers. Next question, Ibu Maike. I think we still have 10 minutes, yeah, so we can pick some more questions.
Now come a few questions regarding how climate protection relates to development, which, as we've heard before, is also a big issue for Indonesia. How is Germany anticipating climate change and seasonal changes in a way that does not disrupt the national economy?
Back to you, Mr. Graf.
Yeah, actually, this is the core of the discussion that we are having in the German press, in the German society right now. What I alluded to in my remarks before, that we have quite a substantive percentage of the German population that sees climate mitigation as a threat to their personal well-being, to their personal prosperity. And the political task for the government and for all of us is to convince the doubters that it's just the other way around, that climate mitigation, even though, of course, whenever you take steps toward climate mitigation, one or the other step might not be pain-free. Let's not argue about that. But eventually, this will be for our common good, and that eventually the green transformation of the German economy will lead to even more prosperity for everyone. This is obviously for the long haul, but I would certainly not say that whatever steps we take now, that we run the risk of disrupting the national economy. That is not the case. We are obviously, we are being faced with many external factors right now, external factors that all happened at the same time. We are having climate change, which is a challenge that is not going to go away within 2 years. We have the energy transformation. That is also a process that will take 1 decade, 2 decades. And on the very top of that, we have a deteriorated security situation in Europe right now, which led to increases of the prices for energy, for oil and gas, which also has, which still has an impact on Germany's, not only Germany's, European economies as a whole, with high inflation, just to name one particular challenge. But again, on the whole, all the steps taken towards transforming our economy to make it green, to make it sustainable, and also to make it more resilient in the future, all these steps are a chance for our economy, are a chance for our businesses, and they certainly are not a threat to our well-being as a society. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
May I add a point, actually?
Sure, please.
As the German lawyer that I am, this question of climate change possibly encroaching on our personal freedoms was actually taken up by the Federal Constitutional Court in a ruling of the year before last, in March 2021. The Federal Constitutional Court, which is the very highest court in Germany, ruled that it was actually the obligation of the state to take effective action against climate change in order to protect people's freedom, because the state is also obligated towards future generations and those who are still young nowadays, and to protect their freedom, and therefore cannot leave us to do what we please right now and then burden it on future generations' shoulders to see how they get along. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oops, where did my questions go? That's the next one. So next question. Still somewhat related, but with a slightly different touch. Can the progress of economic growth for a country really synergize in overcoming the handling of the global climate crisis? Or is it rather a case of symbiotic mutualism, the continuity of development continues, and nature and its resources are maintained? So can there actually be a synergetic effect?
Ibu Meike, maybe you can make bigger. It's a bit hard to read from this part, yeah.
Any ideas? Nah, that didn't really help.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so can the progress of economic growth for a country really synergize in overcoming the handling of global climate crisis, or is rather symbiotic mutualism? Yeah. So this is the continuity of developments and natures. Yeah. So I think Ibu Vivi also mentioned about carrying capacities and how Indonesia will respond, yeah, to the climate crisis, and also while maintaining the economic growth 6 to 7% until 2045. Yeah. So Ibu Vivi maybe wants to have a response on this one? Linked to RPJP, Ibu?
It's kind of like a test for me. Well, I mean, it's hard questions, but I just want to highlight that in the future, I mean, what we put in the long-term development plan, we don't want to put them into a dilemma situation within the economy and also the environment. We need to go in line. So one of the example is, or the directions of a policy direction is to create or to build a socio-ecological resilience. Indonesia is so diverse, we are islands and we are decentralized. So rather than having one policy for this, we also have to develop a resilience in terms of local context. So when we are talking about Indonesia, it's not only one point, one dot, but rather consists of different ways to synchronize the growth, the economy, activities, which along the line with the other factors. The idea is to build a resilience, socio-ecological resilience based on the values that peoples already have. So one of the example is how to manage the waste. Now we are aware that our landfills in all cities, regions will exceed or up to the limits by 2027. So that's why now we convert the way we manage the waste by putting or manage into as nearest as the source of the waste. That's one way. So now all the local governments moving, find a way not to burn, not to open the landfill as big as possible, rather than build the capacity at the community to manage their own waste. So this is only the examples, but many others, again, including the water. And also we want to develop the nexus between the food, energy, and water. So it's also part of the resilience in the socio-ecological context. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Siti. Next question, Ibu Meike.
This is again regarding energy transition. How's the cooperation between Germany and Indonesia, that we already have heard a bit about, ensuring the success of the clean energy transition in this country? Keeping in mind that Indonesia is still highly reliant on fossil energy. More than 70% of Indonesia's electricity supply comes from coal power plants.
Yeah, I think Mr. Grove already mentioned several times about this, yeah. But do you have any additional information or maybe from other experts, colleagues here wants to add cooperations between Germany and Indonesia, ensuring that the success of the clean energy transition in Indonesia, yeah, which is with 70% currently still rely on fossil fuels?
Well, I can only repeat that in our official cooperation with Indonesia, we have a great focus on making Indonesia's energy supply greener. And I should add that it's not only the German government that is active here. We also have many German investors in the country, for instance, investing in solar power plants. We have big projects upcoming in this regard, and we do very much hope that these private projects will be a significant contribution to significantly increase the share of green energy in Indonesia's energy mix.
Yeah, just Well, actually, just to add to the ones that I mentioned earlier. So, one examples that we completed back to the regulations is in the floating PV, Pak. There is one regulations from Ministry of Public Works that we can just optimize the surface, the water surface for 5%. Now the regulation has been changed to increase to 20% for the floating PV because we have problem for talking about the solar cell. So we want to expand also for the water surface, but impeded by the regulation that we only have to optimize only 5%. But now it's already included. It is only example that we are preparing better ecosystem for the implementation of the renewable energy.
Next question.
Now we get to something very visible in this room with large windows. Air pollution in Indonesia, especially Jakarta, is ranked as one of the worst. The debate on the massive ownership of private vehicles and the resulting power plant smoke is being pointed out among the contributing factors besides renewable energy alternatives. Can working from home and planting a lot of trees restore the air quality and help deal with the current climate crisis? And can the continuous use of hairspray, perfume, or cosmetics be categorized as another contributing factor to the climate crisis?
Maybe I will hand over to the expert here who also lives in Jakarta mostly. So what do you think about this one? Yeah. So do we want back to working from home? Of course. Anyone wants to give your views on this one? This is like really something that we face, yeah, every day. Anyone? As Jakarta citizens? Or Ibu Vivi wants to give inputs, Bu, particularly now, like for civil servants, yeah, back to work from home. Can this resolve the air pollution?
Well, what we have today in Jakarta is actually the result of the inconsistency we have. We have put some regulations, but in the implementation is different story. So I think for longer term, we need to keep and adding more policies, including using mass rapid transport, increase the quality of fuel for the Euro 4, for example, putting more strict regulations on the cleaner for the industry and many others. On the shorter term, of course, all of these things is kind of like that's what we can do by now. Scaling it and make it more consistent is a key. Do you want to add?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, as a temporary resident of Jakarta and also living before in other countries, my experience is there is no short-term solution, as Ibu Vivi mentioned. There are a number of things to be done. But I lived for a number of years in Beijing, in China, which was heavily polluted. The same, almost reminds us. The situation here these weeks reminds me of Beijing in 2009, 2010. And the government over time took some really harsh measures, which were really were cleaning up the air because the situation is better now over there. And in a number of Chinese cities, electric motorcycles is definitely something which is worthwhile to think about. And so you mentioned already the subsidy program of the government. I think there should be a stronger push towards that. And you should also take care maybe that not too many people are replacing their motorcycle by cars. Yeah, so that's what happened in China at that time. So the government city government of Beijing then was restricting the number of cars. Yeah, so So only a certain number of cars were allowed to register. Yeah, so you can set quotas. And road pricing is also something Singapore has done very successfully. I think that's also something one could think about. And the overall question is related to the JETP discussion and the exit from dependency on coal for fired power plants. I think that's also something in Beijing I observed coal-fired power plants were moved away from the larger population areas and set up in different areas. That's a short-term solution because we all know that we have to get out of coal to maybe 2040, 2050. So but it helps in terms of local air quality. Thank you.
Thank you, Gert, for sharing your experience from China. Yeah, so of course, this is short-term measure can be done now, but there should be also some long-term measure have to be taken.
If I may add something on that topic, from what I've understood in the like in my previous research and the last few weeks here, is that air pollution is actually one issue where we can see quite clearly how the various environmental crises are interlinked, because it seems that one of the most important contributors to air pollution here is forest fires and peatland fires, which are growing in duration and intensity when El Niño is longer and more severe, from my humble understanding. And that, of course, happens because of climate change. Again, forest and peatland fires exacerbate climate change for obvious reasons, and also diminish adaptation capability. At the same time, the reason that some forests burn, other than the natural events such as El Niño, is also in some events the motivation to make the land arable for plantation. Again, that's another loss of biodiversity and problem to climate change and pollution at the same time. And then, of course, another big contributor seems to be the coal-fired power plants, and then come the transportation issues. So, yeah, I think we really need to focus on what are the largest contributors and, yeah, look the problem in the eye. Yeah, and it just shows how we need to be working on all fronts at the same time.
Okay, maybe another two questions, I think, Ibu Maike.
Yeah, so this is like an after question after the previous one. Can Indonesia emulate Germany in its transport using bicycles, buses, and trains? The number of motorbikes in Indonesia has damaged the air in many cities and regencies. Which obviously I would like to add to, yes, it has, but it's not been the sole most important contributor.
Anyone wants to add? Maybe here there is community bike to work. Can this help solve these issues? Please, Pak Adam.
As a person who cycles to work 3 or 4 times a week, wherever I can, whichever city I live in, I have to say a few things. Obviously, looking out the window, we see the air quality is less than when many of us would like. But I have to say that Indonesia has improved, especially Jakarta, but even in other cities I've noticed, with some infrastructure on cycling. In Jakarta, there is now a lot of bicycle lanes. Many of the times it's being used by motorbikes as well, but when it's clear, it actually makes my commute to work faster by bicycle than by car. Almost always I can get to work faster on a bicycle and home. Now, I don't live very far from my office. It's only about 4 or 5 kilometers, so depending which way I go. Many people have a much more of a challenging commute to work, and the the commute distance for people in Jakarta is very large. And so the previous point about working from home can help reduce that, but also the infrastructure. And Indonesia is making big improvements in this. I see it in many places around. What also needs to happen is the last mile or the last few kilometers to get to that public transport, to make that easier, to provide the local, even although they're not almost the local buses, but bikeways to the infrastructure can be really improved. But I do see some promising signs of that. I think there can also be a lot of education on that and a lot of more awareness raising of the benefits of that. Making it safe for people to do is one of the most important things that can be done. But making the infrastructure, putting it in place, bicycle racks at the bus stops, can also help people do it. It's going to take some time and effort to change that, but a public education campaign will definitely help. I know as a bicycle rider myself, I find it challenging, but I also find it enjoyable and it's healthy. I try and do it even despite the risks, but it needs a lot more awareness. The first things have to come with the infrastructure being there and making it safe and possible for people. Indonesia is making some steps towards that. And I hope that I would really like to see some collaboration between Germany, which uses bicycles a lot, and many European countries. If there is initiatives that could be encouraged to partner between European countries and Indonesia to change the culture of the way people transport, or their public transport, or their travel to work, I think this could make a small but significant change, and one that could actually be beneficial in the long run. We have to do everything, everywhere, all at once, like that Korean film says. You know, on the climate change issue, I think even these small steps, I'm a little bit surprised or less convinced by the hairspray issue, but I'm not a big hairspray user, so I can't answer that one. Thanks.
Thank you, Pak Adam. Yeah, so Pak Adam is cycle to work. I'm commute to work with commuter lines, yeah. Unfortunately, Pak Gert mentioned, but you take ojek from station, not walking. Maybe later. Okay, next questions.
So now we get to the topic of awareness and civil society involvement. How can we create a civilization that is aware of not only present climate conditions, but also its impacts for the future? What can Indonesia learn from developed nations like Germany? While communal action from the government, NGOs, etc. is essential, individual awareness is also important. What do individuals have to do?
So, maybe anyone from NGOs have views to share as well, yeah? So what do individuals have to do, yeah? Maybe in your campaigns, programs, and things like that, if he wants to share. Anyone? From academic? Okay.
Thanks. Maybe just our own experience as an NGO, we also use a lot of not only policy advocacy, but also public engagement using social media now with like Instagram or YouTube. But what we learn is it's always best to promote the real heroes on the ground, which is we work, let's say, with communities in North Sumatra and West Papua. One of our flagship project is the Marine Protection in Raja Ampat, and we always try to show the real actors on the ground, which is the communities of Raja Ampat who protect the marine landscape over there. And it also, like from what we see, like inspire a lot of people and try to not only visit Raja Ampat, but also protect and the marine landscape in this area, but also other places as well. The other thing is when we see the role of indigenous people and local communities as well, I think it's important in the climate action. And you mentioned also about climate justice. I think really recognizing their role in participatory manner in this COP dialogues as well as the development planning is also key, and really not only in this events, but moving on using the Instagram live that you use right now is also useful. Thank you.
So showing the action through local actions, yeah, and also social media is also important. So maybe do you want to add something like what we can learn from German, because it's like massive in German? Or if not, then we can go to the last question, very last question, please.
Mm-hmm. So here we have a member of the Generation Z asking, how can the Gen Z like us be mobilized rather than just made aware to reduce the climate crisis? What kind of movement can we create to make an impact?
Anyone from Gen Z here? Anyone? What can Z can do? Yeah. What kind of movement? Ibu wants to, okay. Ibu Fifi still Gen Z.
I have, my kids are Gen Z. I just want to say that education is the key here. For example, my children now avoid to use the plastic straw, the plastic things, and education could be formal and informal, and changing behavior from the very as early as possible is one of the key.
Thank you, Ibu Fifi. So Ibu Fifi is sharing experience with her children's, yeah. So education, formal, non-formal, also at home, yeah, to reduce plastic waste. So I think that's all the questions. Yeah, I think there's still lots of questions, but unfortunately we have a very limited time today. So thank you to our speakers and also experts here providing the answer and also sharing your view. So I think finally we come to the end of this seminar. So before closing the seminar, I want to draw a conclusion first from what the speaker and the expert said. Yeah. So I think first, global stock take, yes, this we are very looking forward. This should be concluded by end of the UN Climate Summit in 2023, yeah, in Dubai. However, even before the result, yeah, as Mr. Graf mentioned, we can already see there is already a large gaps, yeah. So what is the transformative change that we have to be taken, yeah? Be it on energy sector, energy transition, food and agriculture, Ibu Fifi mentioned, pollutions, yeah, and don't forget also not only green, but also the blue sector is also important, how this transformative change, yeah? So this how to close the gaps, yeah, we have to also keep the 1.5 alive, yeah. This is not political commitment, but how this can be pushed during the COP28, yeah. So, and of course, the other thing that's important is means of implementation, particularly on financing and private engagement. One of the experts also mentioned maybe, of course, the developed countries should also maintaining the predictable and significant climate finance, but from the developing countries such as Indonesia as member of G20 also share a bigger role and bigger responsibility on this kind of thing, yeah. So I think that's what I can conclude for today. But before that one, I would like to give also time for Mr. Graf and Ibu Fifi, maybe in 1 or 2 sentences, Pak. What is your closing statement, Pak? Thank you.
Yeah, my closing statement is the following. First of all, I would like to thank everyone joining us here or online. today for this first iteration of the climate talks. I think we have received very valuable input and very interesting questions from here and from the broader public. Thank you very much for that. This was helpful also for our further thinking and for our further actions on this issue. And personally, I feel encouraged to continue with this series of climate talks here in Jakarta. And I look very much forward to the next iteration that we are going to organize soon. So thank you very much again for participating today. And with this, I hand over to...
First of all, I would like to thank German Embassy and also the GIZ for facilitating this valuable discussions. There are some inspiring ideas that I think would be useful for us to elaborate further in the midterm development plan and other documents, and of course the preparing for the COP. And I wish a lot for the continuations, not only the climate talks, but also the climate actions maybe in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, so not only climate talks, but also climate actions, yeah? So many effort has been done by both government, the Indonesian government, the German government, but as Mr. Graf say, we can do more, yeah? So let's work together to tackle and adapt to climate crisis, yeah? So thank you very much for our amazing speakers here and also for the expert that coming here provided your insight and also very engaging discussion. So please give big applause for all of us. And I close the climate talks today, so hopefully we can meet again in the next climate talks. Thank you very much, everyone.